Welcome to the Revolution of Man podcast. I'm your host, Lance Cashion. This podcast is an extension of my blog at revolutionofman.org. You can go there and check out things that I've written, and also there's an index of previous podcast episodes as well as other resources. So go to revolutionofman.org. You can also subscribe to my email. We send out weekly email just with updates, stuff that I've written, all that. So go there and dig in. I'm also the CEO and founder of the Forge Room Foundation. We equip, activate, and connect Christians in our city to live for Christ and shape culture. And we have an end-of-year campaign going on right now. We're going to raise $100,000 to expand our capabilities in order to mobilize Christians in our city and deploy them into critical areas of our city, everything from education to human trafficking, pro-life issues, politics, arts, music, and the media. And we could really use your help. So go to forgeroom.org and click on Forged for the City, and you can learn more about our end-of-year Forged for the City campaign. Also, I'm an elder and pastor at King's Cross Fellowship here in Fort Worth. We meet on Sunday evenings at 5 p.m. at R4 Gymnasium. You can go to kingscrossfellowship.com to learn more and join us. If you're in the area, come join us at church on Sunday at 5 p.m. At the end of this episode, because we're going to be talking about my life, portions of my life rather, my music career and things like that. At the end of this episode, I'm going to include a track that I wrote several years ago just to give you a sense of, you know, the kind of music that I was writing and things like that during my career. So you can check that out at the end of the episode. Also, I'm going to put a link in the show notes to an interview I did with SuperProgressive about a year and a half ago discussing my music career and the dance scene, electronic dance scene in Orlando. So if you want to dive deeper into that, you can go to that link and listen to that podcast. Also, in the show notes, I'm going to include a link to my story, my testimony. It's on my blog, but I will make sure to link it there so you can learn a little bit more about how God has absolutely changed my life. So thank you guys for listening. My guest today will be Tyler Durham, and this is episode 15 of the Revolution of Man podcast. Please don't forget to like it, share it, and comment on the platform, and we will respond to the comments. So thank you guys so much for your time, and enjoy this episode of Revolution of Man podcast. See ya. Well, welcome to Revolution of Man podcast. I'm your host, Lance Cashion, and I'm with, as always,
Wingman,
my good friend,
Tyler Durham.
Tyler Durham. After you drink your coffee,
Glad to be
welcome.
here, Lance. Yeah,
welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and Catherine made us a fresh pot of coffee.
I know. We're ready to go. Let's do it.
So you had an idea yesterday when we talked on the phone. We actually pre-planned this one a little bit. We didn't just walk into the room and say, what the heck are we going to talk about today?
We did, yeah. So, I thought it'd be cool, knowing your backstory and obviously my backstory as well. How did we go from where we were to full-time ministry? And if you ask some of my friends from when I was younger, would you have predicted that Tyler Durham would be a full-time pastor? They would probably be shocked by that.
Yeah. Same here.
Yeah, and so I think it'd be cool to just share with your audience how we got into full-time ministry. And I remember a few years ago when we were working together at another church, just telling you, hey, you're a pastor. I know that's a hard shift in your mindset, but you're operating as a pastor. I don't care what your job title technically is.
Right.
What you're doing is pastoring other people. So you've got two things in your background that I think are pretty cool. You were a DJ.
Yes.
And you were involved in the business world, selling insurance, right?
We were insurance and wealth management. Mainly started off in insurance, but then moved into wealth management. So
going back to let's kind of start our stories after college.
Okay.
And so you're through with college, and you went to college in Florida.
Right.
Remind me the name of it.
Rollins College. Winter Park, Florida.
Yep. And so graduated. Anthropology degree?
Anthropology major, Australian studies minor with a heavy dose of sociology.
Okay, so once you graduated, then what?
Then I moved back to Texas, went to work for my dad, who owned a large insurance marketing company. So our area was really, our specialty was self-employed people, small business owners, farmers, and ranchers.
And so you were born and raised in Fort Worth?
Born and raised in Fort Worth. And so I had gone to boarding school in Connecticut, and then went to college in Florida, and then came back to Texas, went to work for him, went and got my insurance license pretty much day one. He put me out there and said, hey, you need to go learn how to sell insurance.
Yep.
Learn the product and learn how to sell. He gave me a small salary, and then everything was commissioned. So I got a stack of leads and ended up going down to Corpus Christi.
And did you have any experience in that world before?
Other than working in the mail room during the summers or whatever, just being around.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew it just from being around him and hearing him talk about it and being up at the office. And I kind of knew how the insurance business worked. I didn't know how the inside of it worked, but I knew what insurance was. And then, so as soon as I graduated, I got my insurance, studied for my insurance license, got my insurance license in 98, and then went out and started selling insurance. And I was learning the product while I was selling. So he's like, basically, here's some leads. Go out there, come back when you sell something. And my first policy I sold someone, it was a owner of a bowling alley and his wife down in right outside Rockport, Texas.
And were you with Catherine at that point?
No.
Okay.
No.
But you knew her.
I didn't know her at all.
Oh, you didn't know her at all. Okay.
We met in 99, in November of 99. Right after.
Okay, so when did you graduate?
So I graduated in 98. So I graduated. I was supposed to be in the class in 97, but I had an extra semester. So I graduated technically in 98. I walked in 98.
Gotcha.
And so I came back here, got into the insurance business. But when I was in high school and college, I was interested in music. So I was DJing. Actually, I started DJing when I was in middle school. But fast forward to college, I started playing in clubs and started making music in college in Orlando. And then when I came back, I worked for my dad during the week, and then I DJ'd and made music on the weekends. So I was going. There wasn't much of a scene in Fort Worth, music scene as far as electronic music. So I didn't really care for Dallas too much. So I was going back and forth to Austin. A friend of mine had an apartment down there. I'd stay down there, and eventually we became roommates and split the rent down to the Gables right off Lake Austin Boulevard, and started my DJ career all over again. So I started from zero. So I'd work my way up in Florida, like playing in clubs and doing nights, places, different events. And then I just had to start back over because no one...
And you could work for your dad while living in Austin?
So I had an apartment in Fort Worth, and I had an apartment in Austin. So on the weekends I was down there, and then during the week I was here. So I'd drive down there on Fridays after work, and then stay down there until Sunday, come back, and then work during the week, for him. And then on like Thursday nights or whatever, I go to a friend's house to a studio and work, because I didn't have a ton of friends in Fort Worth. I'd lost contact with a lot of people. And eventually I started a record label in Austin, all these things, and then that eventually took me down to Austin.
What was it called?
Full-time, Slow Motion Music. So we had a record label, a studio. I had 3 or 4 clubs that we had residencies, which means that I would play once a month or once a week, and then I'd do events. So we'd have like Paul Oakenfold and these bigger DJs come in, and then I had all these connections from New York and Orlando where I could bring these DJs in. So I was breaking them in Austin. Some of these guys had never played in Texas before. They were coming over from the UK and Germany and stuff. So
all around the world.
Yeah, so we were doing that. So I had a record label. Then I had a roster of DJs that were on Slow Motion Music and producers. So we would book them different clubs in Austin, and then we would share nights. I'd always have one of my guys. Either I would open for him, meaning that I would play first and then they'd play the rest of the night, or they would open for me. So we had
Fun fact, by the way,
What?
I found out relatively recently from a mutual friend that at my senior, I graduated high school in 1998, so that ages us both.
Yeah.
But
ages me more.
Yeah, at my senior party, come to find out you were the DJ.
I was the DJ.
It's just wild.
I think it was like at the White Elephant Saloon outside on the patio area, and I was up on this platform thing, and I remember I had flash paper and a fog machine, and I think a laser or something. I was,
oh man, that is amazing.
Funny. It was funny.
So, I got into. I don't even know what the right term for it is. I always called it techno music, but I really enjoyed it when I was in college. But you said you were a DJ even in middle school. You kind of When did that first come on the scene? Because I didn't have really much of a clue about it when I was in middle school and even in high school. Mm-hmm. When did the electronic and techno music really break onto the scene in the U.S.?
That's a longer story. So it's
for the layman. You don't have to get into the details, but
so you had electronic music coming on really, in the disco era, is because they started using synthesizers.
Okay.
And you started hearing synthesized music and electronic music, and really started coming around in the late 60s. They were using synthesizers, and then it started the 70s. You had disco music, and then you had people doing stuff in Germany, like this techno music, and then you had the
hip hop music was using.
You had industrial, and then you had early hip hop, which were using 808s and these drum machines and samplers and things like that, and tape to tape, reel to reel type of sampling. But it really, for me, I think the first record I ever got, like vinyl record, was Kiss. When I was like 6 years old, I got a Kiss record.
Really?
My mom got me a Kiss record, and I just play it over and over. And then the first electronic record that I ever got, my mom bought it for me. It was called, it was Ministry's Halloween, because I was born on Halloween. She just happened to see it like in a record. You remember back when they had record stores, CDs and all. This is before CDs. So she saw it somewhere. I think this is how it worked out. And because it's had Halloween, it was the single of Ministry's Halloween, which is an electronic song.
Okay.
And a friend of mine had it. I hadn't really listened to it before. I was like, that song's cool. And I just listened to it over and over and over. And then I started buying. That's when electronic music started to catch on. It was more the industrial stuff, but then you started having, when I got into high school, there was like hardcore and jungle, stuff like that. And I had a friend named Blake Dimsdale at Avon, who was a exchange student from England, and he lived across the hall from me. And so we were friends, and he had these bootleg tapes from raves in England, and he had all these tapes, and I just recorded. Used to dub people's tapes. You liked the music, like you just copy the tape. You had those dual tape deck deals, so I would copy that tape, copy his tapes, and I didn't know who they were. I just liked the music.
Yeah.
And then I think he came in for like spring break or Christmas break. He came to Texas for like 2 weeks and stayed with me and my family.
Yep.
And
y'all were just jamming out on this music all the time.
Yeah. And I don't think I've seen him since graduation, but that kind of got me into more of the electronic stuff. But then you had the pop electronic stuff coming out, which is like Reel to Reel, and who are some of the others? some of the others are like some.
Do you need to have musical giftings to like get into that world? Do you have
training?
Anybody in your family that is musically inclined?
Yeah, so my dad played the trumpet. He was the bugler at Carswell Air Force Base.
Oh, cool.
And my grandmother's music. So my grandfather, my dad's side was a song evangelist. My dad's mom was musical. My mom's mom is musical, like her side of the family. They can all sing, and I think most of them can play the piano and stuff like that. Now, I was never trained. I played everything by ear. I started out with the drums when I was like 6 years old. I got a drum set. And just started playing the drums. I'd listen to music on headphones or loud on the stereo and just sit there and the Beatles and whatever. But I never had any musical training. But I
musically inclined.
I could play stuff by ear.
Yeah.
But besides, the guitar was always kind of tough for me. That was hard for me to pick up. But like piano keys and things like that, I could pick up. But then the DJing aspect came in when I was I started in middle school playing like middle school dances and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then when I got to high school, I'd make mixtapes, and then I was kind of in charge of our pep rallies at Avon. So I'd put all the music. So it was like House of Pain and Run DMC and Onyx and all those like hard hip hop groups, Beastie Boys. And I would put those together for our, dances,
get-togethers,
yeah, whatever,
social.
And then
functions.
when I got to actually when I was high school, we snuck off campus a couple times to go to New York and Boston, and that's the first time I ever went to these like clubs, like these massive clubs where there were DJs. I wasn't paying attention to who the DJs were, as before DJs were like rock stars like they are now. But we would sneak into these clubs in Boston and New York.
And you were kind of mesmerized by it?
Holy smokes. And then when I got to Florida, a good friend of mine was a DJ, and I just picked it up and just started buying records and borrowed his turntables. I go over his house and mix and learn how to mix records like Beat Match. Once I picked that up, then I was like, we're going to go find a night somewhere. So I started my first night at the Croc Club in Winter Park, the Crocodile Club in Winter Park. And
how many people would come to an event in a place like that?
It held maybe 150 people, maybe. I mean, it was tiny. It was a tiny club.
So maybe like 50 to 75 people.
We usually
normally
have like 200 people come through a night.
Off and on, people coming and going.
But it would be packed. I mean, by the end of the night, because we would stay open till like 3.
So where were you at spiritually at this time? Like, were you a Christian? Did you identify as a Christian? Were you a nominal Christian?
I would say I was a, some people would call it a carnal Christian. I had what I thought was my fire insurance, but I was living like I was from hell.
So you like during that period, you weren't really even living a double life. It wasn't like,
I was
going to read my Bible
worldly life.
Yeah, so there was no spiritual influence in that season.
Not at all. But there was. My godmother was praying for me, so I come home and stuff, and go to church with her, and I go to church with my mom, who went to Christ Chapel. So I was somewhat churched.
So you graduated, you moved back, started working for your dad, and then your DJ career really picked up, and you eventually moved to Austin
to start the label.
You'd come up here during the week and had a place to stay here, and then on the weekends you would just be partying
all the whole weekend and doing events and DJing. Like I would get there on Friday. I would probably have a gig or I started playing house parties, so it's people because no one's going to book me in a club, but I did have a record out. So I had a record that came out that kind of helped, called Sun God, and it came out, and that kind of got circulated, and then a few people in Austin figured out that I was the guy behind that record, and so that helped me get some bookings. But I started in house parties, so people would be having a party,
and you were your own.
I'd bring my records,
agent,
and my
marketer, promoter,
started everything.
You were doing all of it, and
then it built a bigger enterprise in Austin that was based in Austin, and we were then connected with Proton Radio, and then I started traveling after I put out an album, a mix album and stuff. And so,
what was that lifestyle like? I mean,
complete debauchery.
But like, I mean, I'm guessing there were times where you were running on fumes because you'd been up for 72 hours, and then you had to drive back to Fort Worth and
right,
do your normal day job,
right.
Like what how was your mindset in that period?
We just
survival.
Not really survival, because I was very driven by making the record label and everything successful. Like I wanted things to be, and it wasn't. There was obviously I was selfish, but it was more like I wanted to build this enterprise of this record label.
Kind of an entrepreneurial mindset.
This team, this crew, which most of these guys were still really good friends with Slow Motion crew, and we lost one guy. He passed away a few years ago, Jamon, but the rest of us we still are connected, and we love each other and stuff. They're all in different stages of life, but most of them live in Austin. But we had this kind of family. We all took care of each other, even though we were crazy. Everybody looked after each other. And when I met Catherine, and she came into that world, these guys,
you trusted them with
I trust them more than most people even now. Like if I was playing until 3 o'clock in the morning and she was tired, I completely trusted these guys that she would.
Do you
make
think
it
some
home
of
okay.
it is like, military guys or even athletes? You go through these experiences together and memories with these individuals, and you're all from different backgrounds, but you have these shared experiences that kind of bring you together and create this bond.
Yeah.
Would you say that's similar to what y'all experience, like through all of the wild experiences? We're like kind of looking out for each other, and
people nearly getting thrown in jail. All the things, and then
that kind of bondage all together.
Yeah, and you couldn't you had to have people that would watch your back in the music industry, particularly DJing and clubs and things like that. Not everybody is cool. There's some shady people. These guys, we all looked out for each other, and they really looked out for me. Like these guys really looked out, because I would be busy either DJing or working with a promoter, whatever. I would be focused on, and there'd be people 4 or 5 of my friends that were kind of like handling everything else. It could be watching the door, to make sure that we're getting paid on everything, or helping me carry crates and crates of records or equipment into a club. I had one friend of mine, it's still a dear friend of mine in Austin, who he was we DJ'd a lot together, and he's got a really successful record label now. And he, he was kind of like my sound engineer too. So if I went into a club and there were some sound issues, because I was always adamant on sound, that if somebody's paying $20, $25, whatever, to come hear me play, or whoever I play, I was like, that sound's got to be good, because that's their experience. That makes or breaks. If you've got bad sound and good music, it doesn't matter. Yeah. You want good music and good sound. And this guy, I could call him at like 2 or 3 in the morning and say, hey, man,
and he'd be there.
Tweak the sound. And, just a friend. That's the way we were, Any
lessons you learned, like leadership or managing people? You essentially started your own business,
right?
In some ways that have carried on or carried over to today, just in terms of leading and managing people.
I think I learned to let people do, and to let people do what they're really good at, and then get out of their way. Like some of these guys were really good house DJs. Mm-hmm. Like I don't need to be telling them what to play,
micromanaging,
or anything. Like these guys are the best at what their style of music. Or if there was somebody, I have a friend that kind of went from not being a DJ that got interested and then started playing, and then trying to coach a friend up that was kind of an up and coming, still trying to mix, but was getting gigs out and still trying to figure out how to mix records properly and stuff, and try not to, hey, get on his case or whatever, but say, hey, dude, that was great, and help them, being that encourager. And then set the conditions for these guys to get gigs. Because I was one of those people, like, if the team is doing well, like if everybody's getting gigs, and it's not about just pushing me out there, even though it's kind of the lead guy, it was like, cool. Like if everybody's playing, if everybody on the team's playing and making music. And
so you didn't feel threatened if your opener was, killing it, and you didn't feel like, oh man, that he could take some of my limelight. There wasn't that
because
mentality.
the way that we structured everything is that I always, as an opening DJ, whenever we would have DJs come in, these bigger DJs were paying thousands, tens of thousands of dollars to come in and play. I always tried to set an example for everybody else. Is like, look, you're an opening DJ. Your job is to set the conditions for them, to put them in the best possible position. So don't bang it. You're kind of like warming up the waters. You're building. And
some guys would be selfish and try to
hammering it at 10 o'clock at night with 100 people in the club that holds 500 or something. You're like, that's not, because I've been in those situations before. When you're a DJ, you have somebody that's an opener that's just hammering it at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and you're going on at like midnight, and they're just boom, 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 and everybody's just socializing and trying to have a drink or whatever, and you have to reset the room. So you come on with like a 3-minute intro where there is no beat.
Is that because you can't keep the momentum at that level?
Because the energy level's already, you have to reset the energy in the room. So
give
you
people
talk
a break.
To the light guy, bring the lights back down, cut out all the beats, or go into something that's like half tempo of where he was, and do a big old intro, and then work back up to give people a breather, and then get to where you need to go. So that would always kind of, piss me off whenever a DJ was hammered. But our guys didn't do that. Like we all knew how to open for each other. So if I was opening for my friend Jamon, who was a house DJ, he didn't. His type of music wasn't hammering type of trance or something. I would play like deep house and little break beats and trip hop to open up for him.
Your listeners don't have a clue.
Yeah, it's just like sorry, but in any event, so the idea is just to set him up for success. And so sometimes, a lot of times, I would open we'd just open for each other, and it trained us. It
was a good team.
Yeah, to be able to handle any type of situation. And we could do our own nights where it took people on a 4-hour, 5-hour journey rather than this just a roller coaster ride from hell.
Yeah. Did you ever meet a Christian DJ in that world?
Probably, but I wouldn't have
been able to recognize it if you did.
Yeah. I think there are some Christians in that world but yet I think they're very quiet. So keeping the story going. Yeah, sorry.
No, this is great. Very interesting. Obviously, because I know your story a little bit. That world kind of sucked you in, and there's a dark side to that world, and you were with. You and Catherine had gotten together. I don't think y'all were married yet. This had been like in 99, 2000.
Yeah.
And when did you realize, oh man, I'm not who I want to be, or I'm not where I want to be? Was there a moment where you realized you had kind of gotten off the rails a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, I had gotten involved in, drugs, alcohol, all that stuff. It gone from being fun to being, now it was like those things were a crutch to keep things going. And so it's almost like you play with fire, you're going to get burned.
How were they a crutch? Could you see this with musicians? I mean, it's like the story arc of every musician is somewhere along the way. You're dabbling with the stuff, and it might even at one point kind of like prime your creative energies, and then all of a sudden those dependencies just take over. Yeah. How were they a crutch? What was overwhelming about that occupation that you needed a crutch?
I think there are certain stresses with it because you're dealing with people that are, including yourself, that are very selfish. So booking agents, DJs, and we generally had a pretty good reputation with people. Like, we treated people really well. Like, we took real good care of our people. But you're still dealing with money. You're still dealing with nightclubs and drugs and lots of money.
Shady world.
And it's a shady world. But then you have an occupation where you're trying to manage a label and all these other things. So you have these stresses. And And then there's always the invite to the parties, like, oh yeah, you played it. Oh yeah, come to the after party. You go to the after party, and then okay, that just strings on, and before you know it, you don't have any sleep, and you're kind of maybe in this
fumes.
You're on fumes, but you're kind of edgy because you don't have any sleep, and yet you're stressed out. And you're like, well, you know,
because you're coming off whatever.
Yeah, a couple of beers would be great.
Yeah,
you know, but I wasn't like a day drink. Like it wasn't that type. It was like, but it was when I was DJing. That's when I would crank everything. It was like that's when the party started. I regularly didn't start drinking before I started playing because I needed to be sober to start playing.
You were running the business too.
Yeah,
so
But on the weekends it was just
wheels off.
Yeah.
So how did you did your dad, who was also your boss, was he like, "Hey son, you're dropping the ball"?
Well, we had a couple of run-ins, you know, because I think he could. I don't know. I never really talked to him much about it, but we had a couple of run-ins. Just on the business side of things, he's basically, you need to make a choice, and then that's when I ended up going to Austin and started labeling. He actually helped me.
What year was? So you left working for your dad in what year?
2000.
So it was 2 years of you doing both, and your dad's like, "Hey, you're gonna have to pick a lane if you want to be successful."
Yeah, and so I chose me, but he was supportive. I mean, he helped. Purchased gear for my studio, which I still have.
Oh, that's cool.
I still have some of that gear.
And you were with Catherine?
I've been with Catherine. So we both moved down there. And then I think just after we got married is when things...
When did you get married?
We got in 2003. And right before we got married is kind of when I came to a full... There's a lot behind that, breakdown and stuff like that. But there was just a point where I was like, "Holy smokes, I'm completely not in control of my life." Mm-hmm. But that's actually the moment when I had that breakdown when God broke through. He was like,
"That's what I've got does.
You. Yeah, you know, you belong to me." I mean, he reminded me that
Did you know that in the moment, or is this reflecting on that? You're like, "Oh, that totally was God," but in the moment, you're like, clueless.
I just knew something shut down all the darkness very quickly, and I didn't know. The only way I could describe the moment was I was having this breakdown and thinking the worst possible thoughts you could think, and then the only way I could describe it is like a point of light broke through, and it was hope, and
it
that
just put you at peace.
And it wasn't peace, but it was. I saw that this wasn't the end. Like I knew it wasn't, and then reflecting back on it, and it wasn't very long after I was like, that was God.
And what did Catherine think about that?
She didn't know a lot of it was going on, that what was going on in my head. Mm-hmm. Like I was dealing with all kinds of stuff.
Yep.
And then went to her, later and discussed it and everything. But she was always really supportive of me. Mm-hmm. She was always supportive, even when I was being a selfish jerk. She still loved me. Mm-hmm. So she was actually a demonstration of God's grace in my life, even though she didn't really know the Lord. But it's like God's providence. He puts this woman in your life that
she wasn't going anywhere.
She wasn't going anywhere, but she also wasn't going to put up with a bunch of nonsense at the same time. So
I've seen that even today.
Yeah, no, it happens. It happens hourly. Praise God. But yeah, so I didn't. It wasn't an immediate departure from that lifestyle. It took probably a couple years of just trying to figure things out, knowing that that's all I want, and then
almost detoxing from that life a little bit, right?
Yeah, and then also letting it go, because I was realizing that I'd made it into something that it was controlling me. Like the talons of the lifestyle their claws were in on me, and my identity was that. And anytime there was a failure inside, slow motion music or me, I didn't get a gig. It was like I was taking it very personally.
Yeah.
Like, no, it's just business. Don't take it personally.
Yeah.
And so God, worked through that and just drew me to Himself, and then finally started handing everything off. Now I still keep a studio, still mess around with music here and there. I still DJ'd for a couple of years on and off, but then the frequency just died down. And then I think it was in 08. No, it was later than that. I forget what year it was when I kind of sort of hung up the headphones. Mm-hmm. And but I've come out of retirement 2 or 3 times for my friend's birthday. Or I had a friend that had a 50th birthday like about 8 months ago, and came out of retirement for about an hour and 15 minutes.
That's cool.
His birthday. They had a big old sound system, and all of our friends we hadn't seen. It was his 50th, so a lot of people flying in, and that was fun. Just go there, see all my friends,
reminiscing.
do what play a set for the people that meant a lot to me. But I'm in a completely different place. I'm not playing it from a selfish point of view. I was like, this is for him and all of our friends. And all their spouses.
Were you playing like "Mercy Me" and
No, I was playing I played like one new song. The rest, one song I wrote for that event. There was a remix I did, and then the rest were kind of. I tried to put things together from the era. So it was like all these songs of like that they would remember, but they weren't the hits of the time. They were like the B-sides that they would remember. Where they were when they heard it.
Yeah, it's like an inside joke.
I remember
almost,
when you played that at Texture, or I remember when that was at Element, opening up for Hybrid or whatever. So it was people could remember. It's like I put the set together. I had the music of what I'd play. I didn't pre-program the set, but I had like, okay, these are the tracks that I need. I got an hour and a half. These are the tracks I need. Here's the 6 tracks I need to play them. Now I've got to figure out how to make them all together to where they're not a jumbled mess, but I hadn't mixed in 4 years.
See, baseball didn't work that way. If I, took an hour and a half to relive baseball, I'd slip a disc, or I'd pull a hamstring,
pull a hammy.
And it would not look pretty. But that's cool. So, when did you and Catherine get married?
We got in 2023 in October. Or 2023, 2003.
2003.
Yeah, so 2023 was our 20th.
And so when you went through the kind of wake-up call / breakdown, and God revealed himself to you, and then it was a 2-year period of you kind of getting out of that world and letting it go.
And it was actually probably a longer period. Like the drugs and the partying began to subside substantially. But yet I was still DJing here and there. But then it kind of, as we were getting more embedded in Fort Worth, because we moved in, I think 04, we moved back or somewhere around there, and we got plugged in at Christ Chapel, and then we were in a small group and things like that. So I started doing triathlons.
How were you making money at that time?
I went back to work for my dad.
Okay, so you went back into insurance.
So in 2001, after 9/11, the nightlife in Austin kind of shut down for a long time. They destroyed the economy in the nightlife in Austin, so people weren't going out. So I lost a lot of money because of 9/11, and worked a couple of jobs. They sucked. And then my dad, and this is God's providence, he got cancer, which he was fine from that cancer. Cancer eventually got him. But he basically said, hey, you need money. I trust you. I need help because I don't know what's going to happen with this cancer thing. You want to come up and go to work? I was like, sure. He's like, no, I'm not going to pay you, because I'd worked myself up way up in a couple of years. And so, I started selling insurance, and then started working the office, and eventually worked my way into being a marketing director and the chief technology officer. So I was the CTO, and then I opened up a call center, and then that kind of my own career in the insurance business took off because I went into the senior market with Medicare and
how long was that season?
Let's see, that would have been 03 to 2011, 12. Yeah, it's because I launched Cashion Financial, which was the wealth management thing, in 2011. I went on staff at a church in 2014. So when I went on staff
and that was at Christ
church
Chapel.
At Christ Chapel, I had just launched my wealth management business is a couple of years, not even a year and a half old or something. But I'd been in the insurance business for a while.
Okay, so how, knowing that background, and you and Catherine are probably still relatively young in the faith in terms of taking ownership of it, and
right,
and you get plugged in at Christ Chapel, you get plugged into I think y'all were involved in a home group or whatever, right, and you had some community around you. How in the world did you go from essentially taking over your dad's business and you have your own wealth management?
Well, so because of ACA, Obamacare, it crushed my dad, his business. So he was in 30 some odd states, 5,000 or so agents, multiple offices doing health insurance. Mm-hmm. But when Obamacare came out, it crushed that business. So him as a distributor and a designer of these major medical products, all of his commissions got cut. So all of his agents, their commissions got cut from, say, a 20% commission to like a 3 or 4% commission. Well, you can't run a business on that.
Small
you eventually run into the red.
What was it about Obamacare that, like, what particular policy was the death blow?
It was the all the mandates, and then it was also, they were setting it up, which we're still under Obamacare now, which is a socialized form of socialized medicine, where
so it monopolized
the carriers are basically, you're not in a single payer system like in some of these other countries, but it's essentially nationalized, where you have these big carriers where they're just administrating these plans, and then you have the government plans, and now it's kind of breaking apart, but it became very expensive really fast. And so the agents were basically cut out, because you would go to the online, marketplace and enter your information and get a plan. Plans didn't always work very well, but then you didn't know how to use the plan. That's the beauty of having an agent. Like, a good agent is they tell you how the thing works. So, like, if I could teach you how your plan works, so that when somebody in your family's sick and you're like, I've got a $3,000 deductible and I go to the doctor for $50 and I've got an accident benefit and my max is $1 million a year, all those things, then...
And you have a relationship with that person?
You call your agent and say, hey, this happened, my daughter's in the hospital or whatever, what's going to happen? I tell them immediately, but they typically already knew, because you taught them how it worked. When people don't know how their plan works and they think it covers everything, then...
They go to their HR at work, and then they go to another. It's more
and these are individual plans. These aren't but it messed up. Basically, all that to say, it just messed up the whole industry. So my dad got crushed. His business got crushed. So I leveraged him. He said, "Hey, look, I've got all this office space, got computers, you got a call center. What do you want to do?" I was like, "I'm going into senior market Medicare," and this is 2010. Or a little bit before 2010, because I saw the writing on the wall. I was like, they're going to crush underage. Everybody under 65 that's not on Medicare, they're going to crush it. Meaning the ACA is going to crush them. So I went into Medicare, because they're not going to touch Medicare. So I went into Medicare and started selling Medicare, and built a little agency and did great. And then people long story, we ended up on the cover of Kiplinger Personal Finance magazine for a trade I made that ended up on CNBC. And then people saw that and they thought that I was an investment guy. And I'm like, no, I'm just trading options. But a friend of mine said, hey, you really like investing, and you're a conservative
and people want to give you their money.
And he's like, you really should think about going and getting your Series 65 and becoming a fiduciary and managing everything. They get their insurance with you, and you just build a team. And I followed their advice and did that. And so I was managing money, and I myself kind of stopped trading options and things like that because I was too busy.
Yeah.
And then of course they're, taking over my dad's company. There wasn't much to take over.
Yeah.
Because of Obamacare.
It was a shell of what it was.
Yeah. And we had some philosophical differences as well as where it should go. He was old school, and I was like, here's the technology, building online platforms and lead generators and just using heavy technology. But he was kind enough to let me leverage him. I had my own. I was running a wealth management firm out of his office.
That's cool.
Mainly a mostly empty office at that point in time, and I had a few guys that were my Medicare.
Did you
guys.
enjoy doing that?
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, it was great.
So then what happened? And then you became a pastor.
Yeah. Then I became a pastor.
So what happened? Tell us how that happened. That's kind of the point of the episode.
Yeah. So we'd been going to Christ Chapel. We're in a small group. I got to know Ted Kitchens, and
who was the senior
pastor at Christ Chapel, the founding pastor. He's been there for 40 years when he retired. And he kind of took me under his wing. I didn't have a lot of good male role models.
Mentorship.
My dad was a great provider, but he himself struggled to be a father because he didn't have that type of role model in his life. So in any event, I kind of latched on to these guys that love God. And then, you have somebody like Ted who's got so much on his plate that would make time every few weeks or whatever to meet and, shared some of my struggles when I opened up to him and shared my struggles with him. And I mean, he just pastored me through some of the, horrible things I'd done in my life and helped me deal with them. I knew that I was forgiven, but it's another thing sensing that you're healed and
to live it out.
Yeah. And that I was kind of just limping along as a Christian, and he kind of stopped and said, "Hey, you seem like you're limping. I'll walk with you."
That's pretty cool.
So I think he maybe saw some things in me that I didn't. He obviously did saw some things in me that I didn't realize were there, and then he started kind of pushing me into like little leadership roles here and there as a volunteer. So I started leading our home group for a season, and then got involved with the pro-life ministry at Christ Chapel, and that was Ted's fault, and then eventually chaired the pro-life ministry as a lay leader, as a volunteer, and that was 2012 and 13, around there. My mentor, Ben McWilliams, our good friend, was the first chair of the pro-life ministry at Christ Chapel.
Is that right?
So I followed in his footsteps.
Yep.
And then they asked me to
Micah Barnum was the local outreach.
He was the local outreach pastor. He was another good friend of mine. And
so the pro-life ministry was under his umbrella of local outreach. And you as a layman were the chair of
I was the chair of the pro-life ministry. So then, fast forward to 14, the church came to me and basically said, "Hey, you want to be the next local outreach?" I was like, "Local outreach pastor?"
Because Micah moved to another department.
Yeah, he moved to another department, and I was like, I've got my mission field. I was perfectly content reaching people through their finances and insurance, because the way that I figured it was, if you handle somebody's insurance and you handle their finances, you know more about them than their spouse does. You really do. Like, their health, everything about them, and you watch their money, everything about them. So you have a trust with that person. They trust you because you know everything about them. And so oftentimes people confide in you, and I didn't realize this, that it was a pastoral role. Mm-hmm. And then when I started then I saw it as, when I started really, reading my Bible and being in community at the church and talking to people like Ted, I was like, I am a pastor in my business. Okay, this is cool. Like, in that role, like, I'm helping people deal with some significant issues, not just talking about their money. It's often, a divorce or a family member dying, and then you're trying to help them know what to do with a trust or
if you
whatever.
Know this much about us, we might as well share with you, hey, we're dealing with this. Can you help us?
Something happened, and we're trying to figure out, we've got a kid in college that's off the rails, and how do we deal with them financially? Yeah. Well, what's going on? Tell me what's going on. You're like, can I pray for you? And people that don't even know the Lord, and so it gave me a a pathway into their lives with scripture, counsel, whatever I could kind of do. And I was still trying to figure things out, and they knew that I was a Christian, but it was, I was able to minister to people through the business. And so when they said, "Hey, do you want to come on staff?" I was like, "No, I've got my mission field. Thanks, but no thanks. I want to be a churchman, be
just involved.
Involved. Support the church financially, get involved, but go on disaster relief stuff. I always loved disaster relief missions. But then, after about 3 months of back and forth, wrestling with God and saying no, eventually I said yes. What
was Catherine's, like, how did she navigate that?
By the time, I think after month 1, she was like, make a decision. She's like, just make a decision.
Yeah.
She's like, how Catherine is. She's just like, let's go.
Yep.
She's a planner. She's a doer.
Let's talk about it and then let's do it.
Yeah. And so
one way or the other.
But she was very, she's very patient because I know how she is, but it had to be God.
And you took a significant pay cut, didn't you?
Well, it wasn't necessarily a pay cut. What I wanted to do was, it wasn't, I'm not motivated by money. I'm motivated by challenge. So it's like, tell me I can't do something that's more challenging to me, and say, hey, we'll give you $1 million. Like, okay, like, tell me I can't do something. But Catherine, what we did was, because I was working and things were going well with insurance, and we're kind of on we're ascendant, so we were kind of moving our way up, buying houses and cars we probably shouldn't be buying, all those things. We made some stupid decisions. I made some stupid decisions. Catherine just
suffered the consequences of that.
Suffered the consequences. But we had, when they hired me, I didn't want to worry about the compensation. So I didn't ask about compensation. I just wanted to make sure we had insurance, and that was basically it. Because we had, I think we had both the kids, Nelson and Lily, at this point. So I wanted to make sure that was good. So I didn't know until I said yes if I was going to get paid anything. Because I've been a volunteer. I was working two almost full-time jobs, or at least a full-time job with my business, and part-time is the For Life chair, because we were building out that initiative. But it was an incredible season to do both those things. That's why I always have had my one foot in the kind of business world, because understanding what people go through that work a 9-to-5, or they're a business owner, or in that corporate world, as a churchman or as a pastor, as an elder, it's very important to have a insight into that world of what they're experiencing, because it's very different than being on a church staff, and that's your vocation, which is fine as well. But it's always good to be able to experience what they're experiencing. Like you lose a deal, or the business goes south for whatever reason, or expands, and now you're dealing with a whole new set of problems. So if you know what they're feeling, like, in a good way, in that you're like, okay, you know what they're going through when they say, I'm just trying to make payroll. Well, okay, I can tell you what that feels like to try to make, when you're responsible for a bunch of other people, or we lost a product line. Tell you what that feels like, somebody getting punched in the gut if you lose your main. So in any event, that was kind of that experience. But then I ended up on staff for 9 years as the local outreach pastor. Yeah,
and so that was 10 years ago when you came on staff, and I was working.
You were still a teenager back then.
Yeah, I got hired in 2013 at Christ Chapel, and so I've seen you along the way. And you don't have a seminary degree, you don't have any pastoral background, formally, and yet over these last 10 years, I've seen you grow theologically and spiritually, and just in terms of displaying, the character of an elder, and you're an elder at our new church at King's Cross. For those who are listening that, want to grow in their faith, want to take those steps in in their knowledge and their understanding and in their practical Christian living, but they have full-time jobs, they have families. What were some of the things you did to make up for the lost time? You know, it's relative. It's been a short season that you've come a long way. What were some of the things you did in those 10 years that helped you grow?
A lot of it, I think, was kind of the runway toward it, which was, I think, one of the first thing I did is try to build relationships, or at least pursue people that I held in high regard, that were solid pastors, or even if they weren't pastors at the church, they were significant Christian men.
Is that why you sought me out immediately when you came out? You were like,
no,
tell me where Tyler is.
I avoided you for that.
Where's Tyler?
Yeah, where's Tyler?
I got to find him now.
Find that dude.
That's
like,
back when you had hair. Relax, man. I'm a young guy. I don't know much.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. We didn't really connect until several years down the road.
Yeah.
But anyways, keep going.
But we had, it was just like, but I think apologetics was one of started reading and listening about apologetics, because I originally thought that I needed to be able to defend what I believed, and I did to some extent, because I had a lot of friends that were atheist, agnostic, kind of like, what is this Christian? What is this whole new Christian? Make some fun or ask some really hard questions. Like, how do these guys even answer? I was like,
and I can't imagine the conversations that you had with your old, DJ friends at 3 a.m. I mean, you definitely were like, I got to be able to defend my faith, because there's some people out there that are
they're going to think
they're all over the place.
Yeah. But it was, part of it was out of necessity and learning how to defend the faith. But then what I found was it was fortifying. Then I started, there were all these questions and the little remarks people would make, and all these things. It's like, I don't know the answer to that question. So I started reading.
But you wanted to.
I wanted to. So there was a thirst for knowledge and the truth. Like, well, why do I believe this? And so you're in apologetics. So I think a recommendation for people is to start out is start reading about apologetics and worldview things. You have to go into the weeds with it,
right?
But like Greg Kokel's stuff and tactics and
so
things
many
like
great
that.
resources now.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things out there that you can get into that are these practical things that help you fortify your faith in a practical way. And then after that, then I started getting more into the worldview stuff, and then the culture stuff, and but it was originally, I came through the doorway of apologetics. And I had a good study Bible, and so I was listening to podcasts, and back then it was the radio. You'd have, people on the radio and stuff like that. And then kind of just kept working through that, and then ended up in getting into more deep theological things when I came on staff, and I was like, what do these things mean?
Yeah.
And then went through the Colson Fellows program that kind of supercharged a lot of it.
And Ben McWilliams, you were really close with Ben McWilliams,
right.
and prayer and the devotional life was kind of a priority for him.
The prayer ministry was the one thing when I went on staff, because I was part of the men's ministry. We go to the men's Bible study. Loved that, but the schedule with 2 little kids and the church schedule, that didn't work. But Mondays at lunch,
you could do that.
I could go pray. And so I devoted myself to being in Mondays with the Master, which was the prayer ministry that met at lunchtime every Monday. It was across the church.
And to your credit, you probably were the only staff person that was there consistently, apart from Ben McWilliams, who ran it.
Who oversaw it. So I made that commitment, and that commitment, as far as spiritual growth and development, is being in the room and around the table with people that were in their 70s, 80s, some of them in their 90s, have been walking with the Lord for 70 years, and they're intercessors.
They had direct access to God Almighty.
Yeah, they got the bat phone, but you're around them, and they've seen answered prayer. They believe it. They know how to pray, and their prayers are serious. They're not this, oh, my dog got sick yesterday. They were praying
for you and your family strategically.
And what's interesting is I was sitting at the table with some of the people that prayed me into the leadership role of the For Life Initiative, and then prayed me onto staff. and I'm sitting around a table with them, praying with them. And I knew, because I had been.
Yeah, because Ben was you knew Ben because you took his position as chair. Ben's leading this prayer group, and he's getting them to pray you on the staff.
Well, and they didn't know. They were just like, we need a local outreach pastor, and before that, we need a For Life chair. To fall. And so they were praying for these things, and then I end up being that person. Guy. I'm like, that's incredible to think about, and humbling to think about. Like, these sweet people were praying me into my job. And so cool. You have this, they have in a positive way, a claim on you, in a good way. And like, we prayed you in here. And so it makes you want to, again, it's in a good way, it's like serve them well, like in church, serve the church well. There's like,
very motivating.
It's very motivating.
Feeling of they're accountable. Duty to
they have
be the man
kind of
that
a claim on
you.
Yeah. They're part of the church family. I have a claim on them as well. You pray for me, I pray for you, and then, but then you start to see that I would start submitting the prayer request for the ministry, and these people would start praying for. And I started watching local outreach and things like we pray for specific things like we need this we need a person chaired this committee over human trafficking. We're like. How do you get involved in human trafficking? You start praying. Sure enough, boop, boop, out of the sky, here they come. God starts delivering the leaders to lead these ministries. And I'm sitting there like, it's like being on the sidelines at the Super Bowl. You're like, and your favorite team's playing. You're like, you're right there watching. And
your coach is a magician, just making things happen out of nowhere.
Yeah, your coach is God. Yeah. And you're just like, but you watch these things, him deliver on these things and remove obstacles, but also put up barriers and say, don't go there. Don't go there. And you're like, okay. And you just, like, dang it, I really wanted to, but you're trusting in him so much, and people are praying, and so in any event, the prayer ministry, apologetics, and then, being around guys that have been walking with the Lord for a while, that you could learn something from.
Being teachable.
So Dr. Ben, Ted.
Yep.
I loved hanging out with those guys. Still love hanging out with those guys.
So I think we might have mentioned this before on a previous podcast, but growing up struggling with dyslexia, reading, probably was a struggle, and probably is to a certain degree to this day. But you didn't just watch YouTube videos and listen to podcasts. You read legitimate, difficult books. Why do you think that's necessary?
Because you're doing something that's uncomfortable. And when you're doing something that's uncomfortable, that's good for you, you're going to grow. And now,
so just the discipline in a world that's filled with distractions and just sound bites, and everything's just these flashes of information.
If you can't get it quick, it's not worth getting.
It's not worth it. So just the sheer discipline of sitting down and focusing on, a book for a chapter, 2 chapters, even if it's just 15 minutes a day, but consistently shapes you as an individual, because it's hard.
It changes your life, because it's the same thing as if you say, hey, I'm gonna train for a marathon, and I'm gonna start out running 5 miles. And you're like, man, I'm tired as heck. I'm gonna run it. I'm gonna run a 6th mile. You're like, you're just gonna push it a little further. And or it's cold and rainy outside. I like to run in the sun and when it's nice, and you're like, I'm gonna go outside and I'm gonna run in the cold and the rain.
Just because I don't want to.
Because I don't want to.
Yeah. It's
not gonna kill me. It's not icy. I'm not gonna slip down no. It's just uncomfortable, and it's that comfort zone thing.
Yeah.
That if you give into the comfort zone, eventually you'll sit down and you won't get back up again. And so that's with reading. I treat it like that. I'm like, last night, perfect example. I'm just tired. And my brain's not working. And I said, I'm gonna read the 5 pages in the Carl Truman book, which I'm trying to get through.
Yep.
And I'm talking to myself in my head. I'm like, I'm not gonna remember a word. I'm gonna highlight, and I know tomorrow I'm gonna have to reread these 5 pages, because I'm not gonna remember a darn thing. But dang it, before I go to sleep tonight, I'm gonna read 5 pages.
Yeah.
And I did.
Yeah.
And I woke up this morning, I didn't remember. but it's okay. I did it because I went to sleep last night, and first of all, I was thinking about God because I was reading this book. I was thinking about history, which is interesting. It made me tired. And
subconsciously, you don't really know. You might not remember.
You don't know how it's shaping you.
But you don't know how it's shaping you, and there is an aspect to that. And I think.
So if you do the hard thing, like if you don't like reading for whatever reason, then you should read. I don't like reading. If you say I don't like reading because I can't see, that's different than I don't like reading because it's uncomfortable. We'll do it.
Or I'm not wired that way.
Yeah.
Like reading is not a wiring thing. If you know how to read, I would argue for most people, if not all of them, it still takes discipline, even if you love it.
Yeah.
To sit down and say no to everything else, especially now that we have these cell phones.
Yeah.
And so it's not a wiring thing; it's a priority thing. And Christianity, uniquely, it's a religion. It's a faith based around a book. God chose
words
all
and
the
language. He didn't choose to communicate to us via emotion or through some type of telepathy or
images or holograms.
The word. He spoke everything into creation. Everything's geared and centered around the word, a verbal language that communicates truth. So reading and words are very important.
And wherever Christianity has gone, the life of the mind has really
it explodes. Scientific method,
literacy,
everything.
Education,
art, music, all those things, and you have to be able to read and speak and understand language in order to do any of those things.
Yep. And especially in order to translate the Word of God into that local language.
And I'm reading about those creeds and confessions, and just the importance of the words, that they mean something because they're tied back to the primary of Scripture. They're describing what the Bible says about a specific topic.
In a clear and succinct way.
Yeah, so this is what we believe about A, B, or C. This is what we believe as Christians. It's articulating what the Bible says. It's not authoritative, but it does have some authority because it's what you believe about the Bible. So it shapes what you believe about the Bible, because you can't, somebody says, hey, what do you believe about the Bible? Well, you can't just spout off the Bible or read them the entire Bible right there. You know, you have to be able to tell them
succinct.
This is what Christians believe
of biblical doctrine.
You have to be able to tell people what believe that are grounded in truth, and the only way you can do that is language and words, and the words have to mean something. That's why when you see people that are distorting meanings of words, that really bothers me. It's dangerous.
Yeah, it's playing with fire.
Yeah.
So last thing, it seems like there's two big themes all the way even to you starting your new nonprofit and then joining me with this church plant and being an elder, is that entrepreneurial spirit where you like the challenge of starting new things, but then also the even though you weren't really big in team sports growing up, you wrestled and I think you might have done some other things when you were younger.
But mainly individual sports.
Yeah, mainly that. There's a team element in each spot where you were bringing other people around you and sharing the responsibilities and not making it a competition over who's going to get the credit.
Yeah.
Is that something that's always been there, or have you realized that, or is it just naturally something that you?
I like working with people. I like. I got tired of trying to do things on my own, and then when I figured out, I was like these. Particularly when I was back to the whole music thing, building a label, that people were just as excited, if not more excited than me about doing something that I was interested in. I was like, well,
surprising, hey.
And if we work together and you're good at promoting and I'm good at, making records, well, why aren't we joining forces and doing something?
Yeah.
So that building teams is what I love, because then particularly when you change the context to you're building kingdom, you're interested in what God's doing in the world, and you're like, well, I've got specific gifts. Somebody else has got gifts. Well, how do we then collaborate and bring all those gifts together to then build the kingdom? So that's why it's always like the entrepreneur, the team builder. I'm terrible at maintaining things, but as far as like getting people together and getting vision, excited and then saying, hey, what can we do to support what God's calling you to do? Like, what do you need from, that's what I appreciate about being a local outreach pastor is like, find the leader to lead a ministry area, like disaster relief, the Kellums, like find those leaders, get out of their way them. And then empower them, give them authority, discretion, and responsibility, and push all the support they need, and then remove whatever obstacles get in their way. So why
do so many people have such a hard time doing that?
Maybe it's because people could be selfish. We're all selfish in some respect, but I think if you've never experienced it, and then you've never really experienced trying to do things on your own, I don't know. I mean, there's probably a dozen different reasons, but I think that when you watch people who are passionate that are on the team, it's like Super Bowl. You don't win the Super Bowl. I think Dave Ramsey says you don't win the Super Bowl by accident, and a quarterback can't win the Super Bowl alone.
Right.
So it's like you have to have a team that's all. You can't be all things. So it's like you got to have a wide receiver, but you also have a nose guard, and you also have to have your center and your tight ends and cornerbacks.
And everyone, I think,
and they all have to be in their area but they have to be somewhat cognizant of everybody else on the team in order to win. And I think that's when you start seeing, and then when something happens, like when my dad passed away, this has been 8-9 years ago. He, watching Wes in local outreach, he worked with me in local outreach, and he was handing them the wheel. I was like, I'm a mess, man. I can't deal with any of this. But watching leaders step in when you can't be there, or if I messed up somewhere, and they would step in, pick up the ball, like you fumbled the ball, Lance. You didn't show up to me, or you were late. Whatever it was, I messed something up, and they didn't cover for me, meaning make an excuse. Like, no, this is okay. Lance messed up. Pick up the ball and run with it. Okay, don't do that again. Okay, I won't.
Keep moving forward.
Help me.
Yeah.
And ask him for help. Just asking people for help, because people want to help. That was a Steve Jobs lesson I learned was that Steve Jobs always said that if he sincerely asked for help for someone on a project or something, no one ever turned him down. And he wasn't trying to sell them something. He's like, learn that as a kid. Just ask for help and people will help you.
Didn't he call some
Hewlett
Packard, the head of
Hewlett from Hewlett Packard, found him in the phone book,
and he was like a teenager, right?
Yeah, he was in like middle school, 12 years old, and was trying to build a computer or something, and found his name in the phone book. Yeah, asked for some parts, and the guy took him under his wing, brought him to his house, his garage full of computer stuff, and he gave him a job at some point.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Just by asking for help, people will help you.
I struggle with that, and it's not, at least for me, it's not like a pride thing. It's something else, but it is. It's not life-giving to the person either. If they're good at something and they want to be a part of the team, you're doing a disservice to not ask them to use their gifts to be a part of the team.
Yeah,
I think some of it is, you worry about not following through on your end. Like, am I going to uphold my end of this relationship? And better for me to just do it myself, because what if I let them down? I think that's some of it. But okay, so pastor was a word that you and I had a lot of conversations, and I think originally, whether you admit it or not, there was a hesitation to take on that title.
Yeah.
Why?
I think I didn't see myself as it, because Ted was the same way. He'd always call me a pastor, and a couple of the elders when I first started, and I'm like, I'm a director, because I was local outreach director, not local outreach pastor. And then I finally started to embrace it. And what I had to do was basically change in my own, like, start calling myself a pastor.
Were you embarrassed to be a pastor? Was it like, I'm not one of those guys, I'm different? Or
no, I think it was,
I don't live up to that.
I think it was a little bit, but it was more of a misunderstanding of what a pastor was biblically.
What did you think it was?
I thought it was more people that preached.
And had like a seminary degree or something.
Yeah, or some degree, or they were professional. They preached. This was their specialty. Mm-hmm. And I think that was a big part of it. Was just not understanding what a pastor was. Mm-hmm. But when I look back on parts of my life, I'm like, oh yeah, you kind of resemble a pastor in some of those respects. Yeah. I didn't know what the heck was going on, but
and you've preached too.
I've preached.
Yeah,
bring the heat.
That's something that you'll probably do more in the future.
Yeah, but I think, but it was you contributed that. I think, and Ben McWilliams contributed to kind of Ted that paradigm shift of like, I need to know what this is. And so I started digging into what it means to be a pastor and watching good pastors, not just people that preach. It's like, that guy's a pastor. I'm watching them pastor people. Okay, now I'm getting a clear vision of what it means to be called a pastor, because it's...
And you're doing those things, so it's like, well, I guess I am a pastor.
So then you embrace it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember we had a couple arguments, like I'm a director, like I direct people, I don't pastor people.
I know.
But then the running joke was which hat was I wearing with like our committee meetings? Like, I'm a director today, I'm not a pastor.
Yeah.
But it was...
So don't ask me any questions about your spiritual life. No, those were funny conversations. It's like, hey, you can call yourself whatever you want. Yeah. But I know you're acting like a pastor right now.
Yeah.
So just embrace it. No, that's good.
Yeah. But it's brought a lot of clarity, I think, when you figure out that's, regardless if I'm on a church staff or not, that I'm still in a pastor's role, and there's no getting around that.
Yeah. Ironically, now, your job title is not pastor at the nonprofit.
No.
But at the church, you're a pastor.
Yeah. But I find myself pastoring even in the nonprofit. Like, it's that pastor's heart that God puts in you, that, you meet with folks that are involved with the ministry, and they bring you their struggles. Like, I met with a couple guys in this past week and struggling with stuff, marriage issue, all these things. I'm like, they set the meeting to talk about Forge Room, and we end up talking about their life. Mm-hmm. And, it's like, that's interesting. It even comes through in those areas.
Well, and really a local church, the leadership of a local church should be constantly looking for men in the church that are behaving as pastors.
Right.
And calling that out in them and identifying that, and then pouring into that.
And helping cultivate that.
Helping them cultivate that with the hopes that one day that individual can be a leader in the church, an elder in the church. And so if you are aspiring to be a pastor, it starts with just embodying the characteristics that are laid out in the New Testament.
Yeah.
In 1 Timothy and in Titus. And
read everything in the Bible that says about shepherd.
And everything, and
the good shepherds and bad shepherds, and read all the scriptures that refers to shepherds, and you will get a very clear picture of what it means to be a pastor.
And you don't have to have any kind of seminary degree. Nope. I think for some people, for most people, especially if you're going to be doing a lot of preaching, I think it's helpful.
Yeah.
But you don't have to have any kind of degree, and you don't have to carry the title pastor to begin pastoring the people that God's put in your life and taking care of them. And in fact, if you start doing that, then I guarantee you that other people are going to recognize that and call that out in you.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
Yep. Well, man, why don't we save my
we were going to split this up. So you're next week. You're up to bat next week.
Did we leave anything out that you?
Oh, there's all kinds of stuff left out.
That you were wanting to maybe share, or to give people just a picture of that journey, that crucial period in your life.
Well, I think that you just never know what God's going to do. Like his providence, it's all God's providence from before I was born. Like however he pulls the story together.
It's amazing.
And we kind of. Before we started the podcast, that you have most people, it's like the saying that most people won't read the 4 gospels in the
Yep.
Bible, but they'll read the 5th gospel and it's your life, which is kind of it's pithy, but it's also, there's something to it. But people, it's just like Paul.
The gospel's displayed in your life.
It's displayed in your life. Your life should be a gospel. It should be a presentation of the glory of God lived, imperfectly in your life to where it tells the story of God not only delivering you, but then using you however to bring himself ultimate glory. And as much as we stumble around and sin and make mistakes, and
God still uses it.
Just make a royal hash of life sometime, God's like, I'm that good.
Yeah.
I can get glory from that mess. I'm like, it's incredible. So, yeah.
What did your friends, when you had the you had that hour and a half where you became a DJ again, because you all got together for some event or reunion or whatever. What have your friends from your old life thought about you being a pastor now? Do they, have they judged you for it, or have they seen that as a good thing and have actually reached out to you?
I think in the beginning and I don't know, there's a period where we just didn't talk a lot, where there's some separation from the lifestyle, and it wasn't meant to be, but we just kind of lost track for
anything personal.
Bit. Yeah,
we're going different directions.
Yeah, but I think there's probably, if I were them, there's probably some skepticism, and then when I got more vocal, there was probably like a little, hey, what's going on here? But I think over the years, I've had friends that lost parents, dealt with illness, marriage issue, whatever that is, that by God's grace,
have reached out to you.
They've reached out to me, been able to pray for them, and on their life's journey. And I'm just praying, okay, Lord, just use me as salt and light, and that they can, and just my prayer is that I be dependable. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not going to be perfect, but I can be dependable. Like, if they call and have a problem, if I say I'm going to pray, I'm going to pray.
That's actually that's a great way of putting it.
That way I don't have to live up to something that I can't, because they all know me well enough.
And if they're not sure, I mean, that's a really good word, because if you're not dependable, then there's a chance they're not going to go to you when that crisis hits, because you might not come through.
And
for
some
them.
of them have had, experiences with the church and things that have been absolutely harmful and toxic, and things either with their families or, there's multiple stories there. But I try to, demonstrate that that's not
everybody.
What you're seeing isn't. We need to look to Christ for the example. Yeah. You're seeing me kind of stumble around, and I'm going to mess up. But the one thing I can be is dependable for them, even if, say, I give them bad advice. Like, I'm trying to give them good advice, there's bad advice. Like, but I'm dependable. I'll pick up the phone,
and you'll still point them to Jesus.
But if I'm praying and I'm in God's Word, then more than likely the advice at least will be, or if I'm counseling them, it's going to be biblical, but trying to piece the things together. Life is messy. Like, how do you deal with some of these issues? Like, I don't know, you kind of have to figure it out on the fly, pray and say, okay, God, I do not have the answers, you do, but my friend needs help.
Yeah.
And he knows that they need help. So it's like,
I got a friend, it's funny you say that, because I have a friend, I used to give him hitting lessons back in the day when he was a young kid in Fort Worth, and he calls me out of the blue, and it's like, hey, I just need some advice. Me and a few of my buddies, we have a best friend that we've been in each other's weddings and all that, and he's actually their close friend is not married, but he's in that inner circle, and he's just gone dark, and not returning calls, not answering texts, and is like slowly cutting everyone off from his life. And he's had struggles with different things, alcohol and substance abuse, but he doesn't think that's the issue right now. He's just kind of in a dark period of depression and he's like, we don't know what to do. We're worried about him, but do we go over there and just
have an intervention
and have an intervention, or is that going to ruin it long term? Or we don't know what to do. And I think once again, you want to be the kind of person that people reach out to in those moments, and you never know who you're going to impact. Especially from your old life, it can be from a distance. They might be listening to your podcast, you don't even know it.
Yeah. But if it points them to Christ, like if everything you do, because again, if you're friends with people long enough, they know the dirt on you. They've seen you at your worst.
Yeah.
Most of them seen you at your most selfish, particularly in our younger days. It's like they've seen me at my worst, and yet they've still remained. That's God's grace that they've remained friends with me after some of the things I've said and done.
Totally.
But yet, kind of your point. But if you're pointing them to Christ and saying, look, I am not perfect, so I'm not trying to be Mr. Perfect. That's not because it's better just not to even try. Mm-hmm. Try to live a godly life, but don't try to be perfect. But if what you're doing is pointing them to Christ in everything that you do, and you don't have to, hit them upside the head with the Bible, but you can impart biblical wisdom and then pray with them. And when you pray with them, you're sharing the gospel through prayer. Yep. You can... you just, like your point, you never know who's watching. Yeah. And you don't.
And I forgot the reason I brought that up is that they're trying to be the dependable friends. Like, we don't know what to do, but we're just going to make sure that he knows we're not going anywhere.
Right.
Like, you might not want to talk with us right now, but we're going to be there when that day comes.
We're willing to take the risk of offending you and like imposing ourselves on your life a little bit.
Because we love you that much.
Because we love you. Yeah, and I think there is a risk. And that's kind of like telling the truth to people that need to hear the truth about something. And you're like, is the truth worth it? Are they worth it? Then you tell them the truth.
Period.
And say this could destroy my friendship. Well, maybe, but probably not.
And what's the alternative?
Rarely is the long-term outcome of telling the truth to someone. They may hate you for a year or something, but typically when you share truth with somebody,
they respect it and they appreciate it.
Yeah,
even
they
if
come
they
around
never
to it because it's like gravity.
Yep.
It pulls them back in.
Yep.
But then if you're the one that, like, everybody else is lying to me and you told me exactly not what I wanted to hear, but what I needed to hear, and you're like, praise God, that's a gift. We all need that. And being back to being dependable. Just be dependable.
Yep. Well, you were lost and now you're found. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, boy, was I lost.
Pretty awesome, man.
All right. Well, thanks, man. Yeah, next time you're up to bat, bro.
All right.
Okay. See you next time.
dangerous.
This